Comics by
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Here's a viewer question. The viewer question is, who would you put in charge of Marvel and DC? If you could wave a magic wand and put anyone you want in charge of Marvel and DC, who would you install as a president of that company? If you ask me, I would pick you, Perch, to be in charge of those companies. Well, that's very nice of you, but I'd be a shitty boss. Who should be in charge of Marvel and DC? All right. So I'm going to take this question very seriously, right? So here's a serious answer, and it's a boring answer because it's serious. So if I could wave a magic wand and put, basically put a new leadership team, and they're not the same company, so let's just pick one of them. You decide. It doesn't really matter to me. It's the same approach for either. Right now, so first of all, Marvel and DC are the big two, and the big two means they're the forerunners, the leaders of comics publishing. They have the characters which have the most recognizable IP. They are the ones that have the most market and distribution buying power. And the thing that a lot of indies or crowdfunding or whatever happens to be, the thing that a lot of you need to understand is that no matter how good you do, it's like with golf. You've heard of the concept of a handicap, right? The handicap of, basically the pace. I'm describing this. Man, now here's a tough part. How do you describe golf handicap to people who know nothing about golf? At any rate, you're weighted against your ability. So the challenge is that if you are into crowdfunding or you're an indie company, you're working at a disadvantage, and the disadvantage is the big two have historical market power. That means that their efforts are going to be easier than your efforts, even if they're exactly the same. You both putting in the same amount of work, they're going to have an easier go of it, and they have an easier go of it because for decades they built up relationships and buying power and IP recognition, all the rest of these things that have made them more powerful as a company. Now, that some people get really wound up in that is unfair, and we got to take away those advantages. And a lot of people who currently describe themselves as socialists hate that fact, but it's human nature. You can't say if you spend many years of your life building up credibility, that credibility should be washed away in an instant because somebody new comes along. That's not how it works. Hard work should generate rewards or should generate a return out of that hard work. That's what it's all about. So the challenge is that that's where they're coming from. So I say that from the perspective of, we're talking about the big two. What should the big two be doing, or how should they, who should run these companies? And the answer is somebody with an MBA, somebody with a lot of financial acumen, somebody with global business experience, somebody who understands market positioning and marketing, somebody who understands running a portfolio company. Arguably, the right person to be the president of Marvel and DC should be somebody who's run a series of funds or venture capitalist investments or things like that. Now, right now, you may be listening to this video going, I disagree completely. The person who should be running Marvel and DC is a big comic book fan. Now, that would be nice if you could get both, but the reality is the position of those companies, the market leaders, you need somebody who really understands market positioning, finance, business distribution, those boring things that in many cases have nothing to do with comics. Now, why would you put a person like that in charge? Well, because they don't need. Man, this sounds gross coming out of my mouth. I just want you to understand that. You don't need somebody who loves comics to excel at those companies. The love for the comics is already baked into the IP that they've been working on for 50, 60 years. What you need is somebody who is business savvy, who understands how to maximize what's already been built. What you need is somebody, and you might describe this as a numbers guy, but it's not a numbers guy. When you say a numbers guy, you often think of somebody like Ike Perlmutter, who goes, I want to charge people for every glass of water they drink at the water cooler because that's how we save costs. That it's not a cost savings mechanism. It's somebody to say, I don't need to convince the world that Spider-Man is a cool character. My passion for Spider-Man really doesn't matter because I've already achieved success in convincing the world that Spider-Man is really cool. What I need to do is be financially market and business driven, you know, inventive to how to make more people realize that Spider-Man is cool, and that's a driver of finances, a driver of marketing. You need somebody who can take properties and maximize those properties. So, for example, Nintendo, and I'll use a more local, if you're in the U.S. example, Niantic. They have a strong success and a strong failure if you've been following that company. They came out with Pokemon Go, which is a mobile app that basically got a bunch of, at first millennials, but ultimately, boomers, to walk around with a phone and catch Pokemon. I just insulted a bunch of millennials who are still playing Pokemon Go. That's fine. But basically, they took a collect 'em all kind of game. They turned it into a mobile juggernaut that generates, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's extremely financially successful for them. And there's a lot of aspects to that product, but they knew how to take a property, keep it true to the heart of collection and everything else, and maximize that value. It was very successful. They also launched this Harry Potter Unite game. And, of course, they were going to fail with that because J.K. Rowling is a giant transphobe. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. They failed because the game sucked, because there was no collection aspect to it. And instead, you were supposed to wander around and catch wizards on your. I mean, it didn't have any kind of draw to keep you coming back. The game mechanics were broken. So they did not understand, how do you take the magic of Harry Potter. And the magic of Harry Potter is simple. It's, you have this giant world that is like a shadow world to our current world, which is to say, there's the normal world and there's the magic world on top of that. And if you can dip into that magic world, you open up a whole new, realm of imagination. And J.K. Rowling did a tremendous job of that in the books, and the movies turned that into a billion-dollar franchise, and the games all fucked that up. And that's where Niantic has a massive success and a big failure in terms of two properties. It's a good object lesson. So if you look at comic books, what needs to happen is you need to have somebody who can come in to say, all right, my opinions of where comic books are or where they should go do not matter. What does the market want? Right now we see that there's a deep hunger for, the X-Men. All right, how do we take the X-Men and how do we give the fans what they want and then figure out a way to give them more than what they want? This is why I've done videos in the past talking about the idea of defy expectations, or, subvert expectations, is not a bad idea if you mean surprise and delight. If you mean tease and then fuck over, then you're doing it wrong. And so with the X-Men, I mean, take the Ten of Swords event. It's like, all right, it's the first big X-Men crossover event. We haven't had one in a very long time for the X-Men. And Jonathan Hickman said it's going to remind us of Fall of Mutants and the Extinction Agenda and all these classic X-Men titles. Okay, cool. And then you started reading it, and it was revealed that, like, oh no, psych, they're going to collect some swords, and then they're going to play board games and shit. And then it's not really going to matter. And the whole event's going to get wrapped up in the Omega issue at the end. Cool. That was subverting expectations in a fuck you kind of way. That is not tapping into the fan base, giving them what they want, and then introducing some things they didn't know that they wanted, but they're really happy to get. That's what a leader of Marvel and DC need to do. Today, the leaders of Marvel and DC seem to be more in the mind of, well, I've got these comics. I want to push a new audience. I don't really know how to do that, but I want to look good on Twitter. So I'll do some things that kind of make me look good on Twitter. Meanwhile, I'll just kill time until the point that I get fired and hopefully get a good retention package out the door at the end. That seems to be the game people are playing. I did this video, and by the way, here's where I don't want to say it's not wrong exactly, but I'm pleased. So I did a video that a lot of people took notice of why don't more people bitch about Jim Lee when it comes to the mismanagement of DC? And I said that in response to, Daniel Cherry quits his job. The amount of people that immediately came in and said, good, screw that guy. He was solely responsible for DC doing everything wrong. And that bothered me not because I love Daniel Cherry. I have him over for dinner. He's a good friend of mine. He's not any of those things. But because Daniel Cherry is not the guy in charge. Jim Lee is. So why does Jim Lee get a pass while Daniel Cherry gets all the blame? The same thing can be said for Sana Amanat and Joe Quesada. The amount of videos and articles and Sana Amanat is ruining Marvel is roughly 10-1. And it is. Please don't come at me in the comments going, I've never seen anybody comment about Sana Amanat. Bullshit. Go search on YouTube. It's all there. People go nuts about how Sana Amanat is ruining Marvel. And rarely does Joe Quesada get brought up. Joe Quesada is in charge. He is over Sana Amanat. He could cut that shit out anytime he wants. He is the boss. That is what irks me, is when people give one guy a pass and the other one. And by the way, if you are currently in CG or one of those groups and you are one of the people who goes, I don't know why people come at us saying we're sexist, racist, and I don't understand. It makes no sense to me why people say those things. That's one of the reasons why. I'm not calling you that. I'm giving you a tip. The tip is when you attack relentlessly the woman and the black guy, and you don't talk about the dude in charge who's actually the boss. Yeah, people think you might have some of the. They might think you're a bit racist or sexist. That's what people do. Is that a correct assumption? I'm not. Who knows? That's up to you. Maybe you are. Maybe you aren't. I'm not calling you that. Trust me. I'm not calling you any of those things. But that's why people feel the way they do. That's why they get those assumptions. Because when you're on video number 82 of Sana Amanat being the sole reason Marvel's going to shit, and you've never said anything about David Gabriel, Ike Perlmutter, or Joe Quesada, people start to draw some conclusions. Just saying. Is it fair? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. But, if you really want to know why people think those things, there's your answer. I'm giving you a tip. The challenge with comic companies is that they've installed people who are passion people, who are, in many cases say they love comics, but they're not particularly good businessmen or women, whatever it happens to be. And what comics needs right now at the top level is that person. What you should do, if I was constructing the company, if I was architecting the company, I would put a very strong business global leader person in charge who understands the value of building a strong team. And then I would populate the editorial staff, the mid-level management staff, of people who are super passionate about comics. And the trust relationship I'd build up is that the business owner would say, hey, I'm going to figure out a way to make every single investment and bet we make have a 10x return or higher. And I'm going to trust that you, the editorial, care about our characters, care about our properties, care about where we're going as much as humanly possible. And you are going to make sure that we're making the best possible moves, and I'm going to make sure that there's money in the bank to do it. That's the relationship that I would do. If I was in big two, totally different story if I was in the indies, but that's what I would do. So there's your answer. If you put me in charge of one of those big two companies, I would blow my brains out. Thanks for listening.